Hey everyone, it's low carb and keto nutrition specialist Amy Berger from 2itnutrition.com bringing you, you know it, keto without the crazy. I did make notes again. I'm on a roll with the notes, and if this shirt looks familiar, it's because I'm on a roll with recording. When I'm in the mood to record, I've said this before, I gotta strike while the iron is hot. And I had a few ideas lined up. I'm just gonna record them all today. Okay, so I have notes. And so today I want to talk to you about why and how keto is different. And I will link below to a video I did that I don't remember the title of right now, but it was something about how keto is different from other diets you've tried in the past. And that video was, if I recall correctly, more specific to weight loss and maybe even to things like diabetes and metabolic syndrome, all the myriad issues related to chronically high blood sugar and or insulin. So I feel like I've already done that video. So this one is not so much about fat loss. It's how and why keto is different from any other diet and how it's really not just a diet. It is a metabolic therapy. And I'll explain what I mean by all of this. But I want to start out by saying that this video was inspired by a book I just finished reading. It is called Ketones, the Fourth Fuel, and it's by Travis Christofferson. I'll put a link to it below. And I think this came out, I will tell you when. I think last year, yeah, 2020. So it's relatively new. I know Travis personally. I think I met him at one or two of the keto conferences, and we keto writers gotta stick together. But I mostly know Travis from his first book called Tripping Over the Truth, Travis Christofferson. This book is phenomenal, out freaking standing. Those of you that have any interest in what's called the metabolic theory of cancer, I can't even go into detail, but let's say there's a whole school of thought that says cancer is genetic defects, blah, blah, mutations, and there's this whole other school that thinks it's a metabolic disease, there's mitochondria are not producing energy the proper way, blah, blah, blah. So I've seen numerous speakers talk about that topic at the various keto conferences, most especially Dr. Thomas Seyfried out of Boston College. That guy is a rock star. Anyway, Travis's first book, Tripping Over the Truth, link below, is about the metabolic theory of cancer, how it came to be, why it came to be, why it fits the scientific evidence so much more elegantly than the genetic mutation theory. And I think most of you that watch my videos might be relatively new to following me, but I actually started as a blogger, and I would love to get back to blogging. It's just really hard to find time to write the kind of really lengthy, meaty posts I like to write. So yeah, picture like video, except in a blog, so it's really long. But years ago, a few years back, I wrote an entire blog series on the metabolic theory of cancer, and I tried to explain some of this very, very high level science and biochemistry in plain English so that it was totally understandable. It's very popular, some of the most popular stuff on my blog. I'll put a link below to the first post, and each post ends with a link to the one that follows in the series, so you'll be able to find them all really easily. For those of you that happen to have an interest in that, you want to understand like why do people talk about using keto for cancer? And not just by itself, in conjunction with your conventional therapies. That's not medical advice, of course, but why is there so much talk about how keto might impact cancer, and that will explain why. So, and the first post in that series about the metabolic theory of cancer was basically a book review. Because that was inspired by this book. So, having read Travis's second book, I'm not writing a blog post about it right now, but I am doing a video about it. And I reviewed this on Amazon as well. I guess I could put a link. I'll put links to just everything. Now, I have been eating a low carb diet for over 15 years, maybe more like 16 or 17 at this point. And I'm very often in ketosis, but not always. Like I don't have a medical condition for which I am required to stay like ultra strict keto all the time or to have a certain level of ketones. I got into this for weight loss. My entree into this was actually the Atkins diet. I started this for weight loss. But I have said in numerous videos and in almost every podcast interview like I've ever done where it happens to come up, I say that even though I started this personally for weight loss, and my mother had type 2 diabetes, and so I sort of do this as to help, control my blood sugar and insulin, all that too. Personally and professionally, I'm most fascinated by keto and low carb for weight loss, type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, PCOS, gout. I wrote a book about Alzheimer's, so that they call that type 3 diabetes, in case you never heard that before. That's if you're wondering what on earth a keto-oriented nutrition professional would have to say about Alzheimer's, diabetes of the brain. But so that's my personal and professional fascination. But over the years that I've been learning about how keto works, like the nitty-gritty of the biochemistry, I become more and more overwhelmed by the potential of this diet, and I use the term diet loosely, by the potential of this metabolic nutritional therapy to have a positive impact on so many different things that we have only like begun to scratch the surface. Let me consult the notes, otherwise I'll get lost here. Yeah. So I've said on all these podcasts now that at this point, with how I've expanded my knowledge of keto and how it works and different mechanisms, weight loss and like controlling blood sugar and stuff is almost the least impressive things that happen when you cut carbohydrates way down in your diet. And I'm not dismissing the power of that and the value of that. I know people that have lost over 300 pounds. Yes, you know who you are. I'm looking at you. And another friend of mine has lost over 250. Like, that's huge. That will radically change someone's life. I'm not trying to downplay or belittle that degree of weight loss. I'm not even trying to downplay losing 10 or 15 pounds. That's a big deal too. Or certainly not downplaying reversing type 2 diabetes or massively improving blood sugar control in type 1 or reversing PCOS and conceiving a child naturally, like all this stuff. I'm not saying that that's not a big deal, because it is. But it's an even bigger deal when you are born with some kind of really rare, until now untreatable neurological disease or condition. So many children are born with these very rare, like 1 in 2 million children are born with this like rare inborn error of metabolism or something. Like a lot of these rare, very rare diseases come because there is a defect in an enzyme where like one particular teeny tiny enzyme is not produced correctly. You don't produce enough of it, or you produce too much of it. Either way, you can have catastrophic problems, right? And that's just one example, but the scientific papers in the published medical journals are piling up so much over and over and over in these like very rare, I want to say the word weird. It's not weird, like rare, otherwise untreatable. There's no medications, there's no therapies, there's no surgeries, otherwise untreatable conditions that keto seems to be working for. And by working for, if you're some people with epilepsy, children and adults, can become completely seizure free on keto. Some can't, but most people will have at least some reduction in the frequency or the severity of seizures. So keto usually works to some extent, but so even when it doesn't completely address somebody's condition, they might have a massive improvement. Children that were nonverbal, children that couldn't walk, children that could barely function, like catatonic. And now they're like little children, playing, smiling, making eye contact, maybe even speaking. Like it may not cure you, it's not going to reverse something, but there's something so incredibly powerful about this metabolic nutritional therapy that you do not get from any other way of eating. None. And so that's part of what makes keto very different from some of these other diets, because all diets can work for fat loss if you do it right. Like keto is not the only thing that works. I think it works really well for various reasons, but a lot of different diets can help you lose weight. You can even reverse type 2 diabetes eating a low fat diet or eating a vegetarian diet. Like that's a thing. Keto's not the only way. For some of these other things, keto is the only way. It's the only thing. And I won't name specific ones, but just another example, there's something called glycogen storage disease. And there's a couple of, I know there's at least 5 types. And some of them respond really well to keto because one of them, it's actually type 5. It's called McArdle disease. Dr. Westman has researched this with a particular, like a patient group that took it upon themselves to learn to do keto, and they fixed themselves, and so they contacted him. So glycogen storage disease 5, McArdle disease, is where you can store, and glycogen is stored carbohydrate. It's stored in the liver, stored in the muscles. Glycogen storage disease 5, I think, is where you cannot access your muscle glycogen. I don't remember if it's also the liver glycogen. You cannot access the muscle glycogen. You store it, but it means that you run out of energy really, really quickly, because as soon as glucose is used up in your blood, you can't get the glycogen out. You're going to be tired, you're going to be short of breath, you're going to be fatigued. And these people realized, and the usual treatment is to just eat sugar all day long because you can't get it out of your muscles. You better just keep it in the blood all day. Yeah, that's a great solution. They took it upon themselves. They discovered, well, we can't access our sugar stores, our carbohydrate stores. Is there some other fuel that our muscles could maybe run on? Is there some other fuel that we could use instead of depending on this glucose that we can't really depend on? Oh, we can run on fat and ketones? Oh, how fascinating. Let's try that. And the massive, massive improvements in again, a disease that is otherwise untreatable. So let me get back to the notes, and where can I start? Start 12 minutes in. Okay, the reason I brought up this book is because Travis Christofferson talks about 3 guys. That's Otto Warburg, who's very well known in the cancer world for his research in how cancer ferments, and it has a different kind of metabolism than normal healthy cells. Hans Krebs, those of you that took high school biology, college chemistry, the Krebs cycle, the ATP generating cycle in the mitochondria, that's Dr. Krebs. That's Hans Krebs. And then we've got Richard Veech. Richard Veech has published, well, he passed away, I think last year, 2020 maybe. And his research, I've read so many of his papers. His research has really informed a lot of my own understanding on ketones, ketogenic diets, the ketone ester, exogenous ketones. So Travis Christofferson talks about the history of the scientific discoveries of these 3 men and their research colleagues. I mean, let's not pretend it was all men. It was some women worked in these labs. Thank you very much. But he profiles these 3 scientists, and how the findings of one built upon the other. They were students. So Hans Krebs was Warburg's student, and Veech was Krebs' student. So these insanely famous scientists throughout history were all connected. And they all studied metabolism and energy generation and cellular respiration and all this nerdy stuff. And, well, fascinating to me, nerdy to the rest of the world. But one thing I want to emphasize is that, and I'll bring this back to why keto is so incredible to me, because I keep forgetting just to detail more of the book. I've been eating this way and learning about this, reading the scientific papers, reading textbooks for years, and I still learned a few things that were new to me. Now, having said that, I do not recommend this book if you're just a beginner and you just want to learn more about keto for weight loss, or why does keto is so helpful for diabetes. You're not going to get that out of this book. If you are much more well versed already in the science and biochemistry of the ketogenic diet and cellular metabolism in general, this book will knock your socks off. You can still read it if you don't know the science already, but I really think you're going to have a hard time understanding some of it. And I actually spoke to Travis, and he said it's not really intended for the beginner, although he tried to write it in a way that could accommodate everyone. He doesn't expect you to, like, you know, love this or even understand all of it if you just kind of, and it's not a diet book. There's no food list. There's no meal plan. This is it's a science history book is really what it is. But I learned things that were new. And the reason I had to do this video, which is what I should have started off with 15 minutes ago, the reason I had to do this video is because the things that I learned, or things that I already knew but got a refresher on, and the way that Travis explained them was so powerful that I have a whole new respect and a whole new passion and fire for how incredibly powerful and therapeutic this way of eating is, this metabolic nutritional therapy. Like, okay, you want to lose weight? Great, I'll help you with that. You want to control your blood sugar? Great, we'll help you with that too. You want to try, attempt potentially to address something really, really out there that no one has an answer for? Let's give it a try for reasons that are in here and reasons that I will explain with the notes. So I really thank Travis for like lighting this fire under me, because I was starting to get burnt out, y'all. I'm not gonna, and I can't believe I just said y'all, because I was born and raised in New York, but I lived in North Carolina for almost 3 years. Yeah, almost 3 years. No, 3 years. Just 3 years. Anyway, I said y'all, it came out of my mouth. I've also lived in Pittsburgh, where they say yins, Y-I-N-Z, like a yinzer. So those of you watching from Pittsburgh and Western Pennsylvania, you're laughing. Everyone else is like, what? That's so weird. In New York, we just say use guys. Use guys. I got a whole new appreciation for the ketogenic diet, and even for the exogenous ketones, and I'll talk about that in a bit. So this is so different. It's so much more than a diet. It is a metabolic therapy. I mentioned in a previous video that a group that I'm part of, the Society for Metabolic Health Practitioners, we don't use the K word even. We don't call it keto. We don't even call it low carb. They call it TCR, therapeutic carbohydrate restriction, because that takes away all the baggage and all the stigma of keto and even of low carb. When you call it something very scientific and very medical sounding, oh, therapeutic carbohydrate restriction, oh, I thought you were doing that crazy wackadoodle keto diet. You are doing therapeutic carbohydrate restriction. Proceed, go right ahead. So but that's exact. It is restricting dietary carbohydrate in order to target a therapeutic purpose, in order to get a beneficial therapeutic outcome. And I'll go into the other, it's not just the diet. I mean, Travis talks about the exogenous ketones. So, but let me see what else I want to say. So it's really, really different. Like I did that video on, I was so like the rant about the weight loss researchers. I'll put a link if I don't run out of room, because all these other links I have to put. All diets can work for weight loss, right? And so keto, the efficacy of keto and why and how keto works for weight loss goes beyond the fact that in most people it controls your appetite really well, and it sort of suppresses hunger so well that you just naturally eat less. You eat less because you're not as hungry, and you're probably hungry much less frequently. That's a thing. But that does not explain all of the other many reasons why keto makes it easier to lose weight. And those of us, me among you, who have tried so many other ways to lose weight and found it almost impossible, and we did keto, and lo and behold, it was either easy or it was easier than anything we had ever tried before. And so that's true. But what I'm going to talk about today goes so far beyond the appetite suppression. It goes so far beyond the weight loss, so far beyond the blood sugar. Travis Christofferson does a really, really good job of explaining, like at the cellular level, so many of the very, very rare neurological things. There's lysosomal storage disease, like things you've never even heard of, that keto has been shown to help, or is at least like very good reasons why it would help. A lot of these conditions have to do with problems of generating energy at the cellular level in your mitochondria, like just the electrochemical gradient is broken, or something is off, something is, the channels are, and the way that keto changes how your body metabolizes energy just bypasses some of that. It's why it's so good for some of these conditions. And like if you could look at a cell, look at the electron transport chain that you learned in high school biology or whatever, you would see that keto induces changes to the way cells generate energy that just do not occur on other ways of eating. They do not occur, or they don't occur anywhere near as powerfully as when you restrict carbohydrate to a ketogenic level, as a therapeutic carbohydrate restriction. So Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's disease, traumatic brain injury, bipolar, schizophrenia. I can't get into detail, but I'll link to a video I did on keto and mental health that goes through at least 4 or 5 reasons, like biochemical mechanisms that could potentially explain why. Why are there studies showing keto helps migraine? Why are there studies showing keto helps bipolar and schizophrenia and depression and all that? Well, I'll link to that video. But these like cellular biochemical and enzymatic mechanisms are why, and again, they don't occur on other ways of eating. And I'm not even talking about the weight loss, right? Nothing to do with making yourself thinner. So that's something. Then what else did I want to say? Let me talk about I'll talk about the exogenous ketones, and then I'll get into the just teeny tiny bit of the history. So those of you that have watched my videos or seen me present or even read my Alzheimer's book, I have not been the biggest fan of the exogenous ketones. And those of you who've never heard that big word before, exogenous means from outside the body. Exo, like an exoskeleton. Exogenous, from the outside. Endogenous, made on the inside. So when you're on a ketogenic diet and your body's just making ketones as a byproduct of breaking down fat, those are endogenous, those are your body's ketones. Exogenous ketones are ketones that you take from the outside. It's not MCT oil. MCT oil does not have ketones in it. It's a special kind of fatty acid that your body converts into ketones, but there's no actual ketones in MCT oil or coconut oil. When you use exogenous ketones, they are actually ketones. And as far I know of 2 different kinds, there might be more, but these are the 2 that I know of. There's the ketone salts, which are the ones that are much more readily available. There's several different, mass marketing companies that sell these now. You can find them on the internet. And they are ketone salts, and it's beta hydroxybutyrate. It's the particular ketone, and it's called the salt because the molecular formula and how it's bound in the molecule, the beta hydroxybutyrate is bound to sodium, potassium, or magnesium. I think even calcium, maybe not. Sorry, I haven't looked at the labels in a while, but it's bound to these electrolyte minerals, which are like potassium salts, calcium salts, sodium, obviously. The chemical term for these is salts, although it's not the way we think of it as table salt, like NaCl, regular salt. The point is, the ketone is bound to these salts. And there's the other type of exogenous ketone is called the ester. And Dr. Veach, student of Hans Krebs of the Krebs Cycle, was instrumental in developing that product. And I'm much more friendly to both forms of exogenous ketones, but like something I learned, it wasn't new to me, but the way that Travis explained it in here was one of the best I've ever read. There's some problems with the ketone salt. The first is that in order to it comes as a powder that you mix in water and you drink it as a beverage. Okay, no big deal. But the reason the ketone has to be bound to these salts and these minerals has to do with absorption. It has to do a little bit with palatability. It's very acidic, so it has to be bound to these minerals or something. And it's not as effective because in order to consume the amount of this ketone salt that you would need to get a therapeutic level of beta hydroxybutyrate, you would like overdose, so to speak, on the magnesium, the calcium, the sodium, not so much, but it would be like you couldn't even drink it. You would have to drink so much of it, or like it just would be really hard to do. And you could potentially maybe have an imbalance somewhere if you were taking that many electrolytes orally. And the other problem with the ketone salt is that many, if not all, don't quote me, biochemical molecules have two forms. They're like mirror images. There's an L form and a D form. And so if you've ever seen amino acid supplements, you'll see L-tryptophan, L-glutamine. So the body uses amino acids in the L form. Beta hydroxybutyrate has an L form and a D form. Your body mostly uses the D form. And in the ketone salt, though, the ketone salt provides D and L. And L is not bad for you, but the L supposedly does not, the L-beta hydroxybutyrate doesn't give you the same therapeutic effect, the same change to that cellular gradient, that the cellular energy generation. You don't get the same effect from the L as you get from the D. So the ketone ester is just a very different formulation of this molecule. It usually comes pre-made as a liquid. There's a couple of companies marketing it. It's not cheap. It does not taste very good, but I think it's extremely promising for a number of very debilitating neurological and neurodegenerative conditions. And the research is in its infancy. Like don't misunderstand me. There's no magical cures here. The research is evolving, it's expanding, but it is so very encouraging and so very promising. Remember I said so many of these conditions have to do with problems of generating energy, like at the cellular level. And so if we can grease those skids, if we can like smooth that process by providing these ketones, and geez, let's do it. And the ester is much more potent than the salt because the ester is 100% that D form. So remember I said that the molecule, they're like mirror images, same molecular formula, same number of carbons, same number of hydrogen, same this, same that, but mirror images. So when it's like a left-hand glove and a right-hand glove, they don't fit the same. You can't put the right hand glove on the left hand, or you can, but it doesn't really fit right and it feels weird. They don't have the same effect. So let me see. That's the ester is all the D form. And also, because the ester does not have to be bound to those salts, you can take it in a much higher concentration. You can basically get a much higher dose at a time. And so the results might be better with that. But it's really, it does not taste good, although supposedly the newer formulations taste better. Like I think it just is the molecule itself, and it's really, really hard to mask how awful it tastes. But you know, if I was living with one of these conditions, I could get past swallowing something that tasted really gross for the potential of, and I emphasize the word potential. So this book also, Travis provided one of the best explanations I've ever read for genetics versus epigenetics, right? Genetics is like your DNA, the base pairs, the code that is in your DNA. Epigenetics is the influences in your diet, your environment, your air, your sleep, all the other stuff that influences how those genes get expressed. Why do some of us get certain sicknesses and other people don't? Why do this and that? Like, that's the epigenetics, the sort of environmental and dietary influences on which genes get expressed, when they get expressed, how they get expressed. He just had like the best explanation. And he even explained, I won't go into detail because if you want to know the details, join my Patreon group because we talk in detail there, but link below. He explained one or two of the mechanisms that I've read about in scientific papers that I didn't really understand. And I would read that section but kind of gloss over it because I don't know what they're talking about. The nerds among you, I'm talking about histone deacetylase inhibition, HDAC, HDAC. Ketones are HDAC inhibitors. And I'm talking about histones themselves. Somebody explained to me in plain English what a histone is and why it matters if we inhibit their deacetylation. He has the best explanation I've ever, he is the first person that got me to understand what that is talking about. So kudos to Travis. But all of that stuff just contributed further to my reignited passion for how powerful this way of eating is and how much I wish more people knew about it, especially I've looked at some of the traumatic brain injury research, like my Alzheimer's book, and that sort of rabbit hole, so to speak, led me to look more into Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, traumatic brain injury. And I just think for so many reasons, ketones and the ketogenic diet and exogenous ketones have so much power to help. Not to magically fix anybody. You never, like, I never speak in hyperbole. Well, I speak in hyperbole all the time. I try not to do it scientifically, like in my private life at home, everything is exaggerated, right? But I was saying I used to be sort of poo-pooing the exogenous ketones, like, oh, because it's true that you will not get all of the same benefits from the exogenous ketones as you get from the diet. The diet induces a lot of like physiological and hormonal changes that you will not get simply by drinking ketones. But that doesn't mean that getting ketones any which way you can, whether through a ketogenic diet, whether through some MCT oil, or whether through the salts or esters, however, we need some ketones, it could be incredibly therapeutic, right? Because in something like weight loss or diabetes or all the metabolic syndrome related things, I think, among many other mechanisms, the primary reason keto is good is because it keeps that blood sugar low normal, it keeps insulin low normal, and those two things alone fix so much that is wrong with the body in all of these conditions. But apart from that, when you have the processes by which these ketones are generated, and then the processes by which the ketones themselves are converted into energy, they are metabolized too, is responsible for these other changes. So just it's almost like regardless of your blood sugar or insulin level, forget all that stuff. For these other really rare, untreatable conditions, it's the ketones themselves, the mere presence of the ketones, that is going to have the effect. So there's a place for both, and I have a newfound respect for that after reading this book. I'm very much still biased toward the diet, but there are situations, and I've always said so, there are situations that will warrant the exogenous ketones, and maybe both. There may be conditions where do both. Get as many ketones as you can for any which way you can, Let's see what else I can say. I also wanted to talk about how when you look back to, Otto Warburg, and I started off talking about the metabolic theory of cancer. Otto Warburg did most of his research in like the 1920s, 30s, 40s. And Krebs was more like 60s, I guess, 70s maybe. Anyway, I learned about all of this stuff in graduate school for nutrition, right? We learned about Otto Warburg. We learned about how Krebs Cycle, Veach, not so much. He was like newer and not as well known. But when you learn about this stuff in those textbooks, it sounds like this is ancient history. It sounds like all of this was known. All of these biochemical processes were worked out centuries ago. No, 1900s, mid 1900s. The Krebs Cycle, I think it was the 60s when he worked out each of those individual steps. And the Krebs Cycle is how we convert everything to ATP energy, not just like the glucose. And I said the glycolysis, it starts, that was in a different video, sorry. Glucose, fatty acids, carbon skeletons from protein, ketones, maybe even alcohol, the way everything is metabolized eventually will wind up in the Krebs Cycle. And that was only worked out in the 60s. That was before my time, but probably many of you watching were alive and well, and Hans Krebs was too, doing his research. Richard Veach, like I said, he just died last year. He was publishing papers up until the very end. I mean, so many of his papers were really, really instrumental in my understanding of all this. And so I say that just to sort of give you an appreciation for not only how new this research is, but for how far we've come and how quickly it's happened. The best comparison I can make is to man-powered flight. Like, think about the Wright brothers in Kitty Hawk, right? Going from the first little flying experiments in Kitty Hawk to the space shuttle in less than a century is like I mean, way, way less than a century. I don't know the exact years, but that exploded. You think the Wright brothers could have imagined the International Space Station? I mean, maybe they did. Maybe they had like grandiose visions, but that happened so quickly. The knowledge just built exponentially upon itself. And that's exactly what's happened with this research. Otto Warburg, 1920s, 1930s, realizing that some cells have glucose and they ferment, and then some cells will take the glucose, they won't ferment it, they'll break it down fully into something else through respiration. And then for Krebs to have worked out what he did, and then for Veach to carry that torch and create this exogenous ketone ester. This was, I mean, within the span of 80 years. Like, it's incredible how fast this knowledge has exploded and how we are all benefiting from that. All of us are benefiting from it. Now, some of this, like if you are in this for weight loss or type 2 diabetes, it's almost irrelevant to you. You could have read Banting's letter on corpulence in the 1860s and you could have lost weight. I mean, 1860s. They knew that there was something interesting about carbohydrate restriction that helped you lose weight more easily than doing just about anything else. But this newer stuff, this such phenomenally promising biochemical mechanisms by which this therapy, this dietary, nutritional, and exogenous molecule therapy can work, is brand new to being worked out. And I think there's so much promise. And let me see when sorry, I'm looking at the notes if you can't see me holding up the paper. That's kind of the main thing. I just wanted to share like that. Like I said, I was running out of steam. There's only so much you can talk about protein and fat and carbs. Like, there's only so much we can do. And this really reignited my passion for how powerful and the potential. Because there's a lot we don't know. Like, let me emphasize that. There's so many unanswered questions, but the fact that the research is even happening, the fact that they're looking at ketogenic diets and exogenous ketones for traumatic brain injury, for schizophrenia, for migraine, for bipolar, for epilepsy, for Angelman syndrome, like things you've never even heard of, the glycogen storage diseases. There's other, see if I can think of any off the top of my head. There's others that I never even heard of some of these conditions, but I'll find a paper and it's a one case report, like one infant or one toddler had this really rare thing. The parents, did their own research. Let's try keto, and the kid improved. Not cured, but noticeable improvement. There's just too many to count. There's too many of these anecdotes to count. So the fact that it's being looked into seriously, there's an event called the Metabolic Health Summit that is happening. Thank goodness it's happening this in 2022, May 2022 for the first. They had to cancel 2 years in a row. And it's pretty new. It's a relatively new conference compared to some of the old ones, but or older ones. I think it's probably the most serious academic one. Like Tom Seyfried speaks at this one, and Stephen Cunnane, one of my favorite Alzheimer's researchers, speaks. Like Dr. Westman speaks, and Stephen Finney usually speaks at this one. And that is where, and one of my favorite neurological neurodegeneration and keto researchers, John Rowe, presents. That's the premier event, I think, for like the really academic new frontiers, exciting new breakthroughs. That's that event, I would say, is known for. And they also do obesity, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, they run the gamut. But it's so nice to see this getting out more and more scientists looking into this, more and more serious researchers, and that it's being taken seriously. Like I said, I'll link to that video I did on keto, and the people say that keto is a fad and it's unsustainable. It's bad enough when they say that erroneously about using keto for weight loss or managing your blood sugar. This is literally a life-changing metabolic therapy for some people, and to dismiss it as some crackpot fad makes me want to punch people in the face. because you might have people out there with a child severely disabled, severely debilitated by some really rare thing, that keto might just offer a little bit of help where there's nothing else on the entire planet that has provided this tiniest modicum of help. Keto might help. You know, Dr. Westman tells a story. He was at a conference in Indonesia. They had a keto conference out there. I've probably shared this story before, but Dr. Westman's not a very emotional guy. I've seen him break down in tears on stage twice telling this story. I probably won't because I wasn't there, so it's not as powerful for me, but the conference was organized by a man who's a very wealthy engineer, and the man, the reason he knew about keto was his son was born with cerebral palsy. And he, being an engineer, he's like, I'll figure this out. What's up with cerebral palsy? What's the problem? And the doctors said, well, there's not enough myelin in the brain. And so the nerves don't fire correctly, development doesn't happen, there's not enough myelin. So this engineer takes it upon himself to research, well, how do you get myelin into the brain? How does the brain make myelin? Myelin is made out of these things called ketones. And cholesterol also, but like, ketones help contribute to making myelin. I came across this thing called the ketogenic diet because it generates ketones. Maybe I should like have my son try that. So he was the engineer, the man was a little bit chubby, not fat at all, but a little chubby. He goes on the diet for himself, loses weight, feels great. They put the son on the diet, and they were told that the son would never walk. The cerebral palsy, the kid is never going to walk. The reason Dr. Westman breaks down in tears every time he tells this story on a stage in front of like 400 people is that Tio, the engineer, is telling this story, and then he's like, hey, come on. And you know who walks onto the stage is the son. The son they were told would never walk because he had cerebral freaking palsy. They put him on a ketogenic diet, and now he can walk. And I've seen pictures of him. He has braces. He walks with like braces, but he's walking. He uses braces, but did you hear the part about where he's walking because of the ketogenic diet? So to tell people, like, and you've got parents like that all over the world, not just, and I'm not saying that this will help in every case of cerebral palsy, but here's a fascinating case study or fascinating anecdote. I'm not saying it's going to work for every rare thing out there, every neurological, every developmental delay thing. I'm not saying that. But we've got to stop allowing misguided, well-meaning, but misguided medical and nutrition and dietetics professionals. We have to stop letting them scare people away from this, talk them out of it, gaslight them. Oh, it can't possibly be the ketones. It's got to be something else. No, this has got to stop. And like, thank you, Travis Christofferson, for firing me up again. And because it's not getting out there, like, and it's worth trying if you have a child or yourself or an elderly, whoever the person is that might benefit from this. Try the diet. If they can't or won't adhere to the diet, which I know can be a problem, do the exogenous ketones or do both depending on the situation. Try it. You know, my friend Rob Wolf, he calls it his greasy used car salesman pitch. Give it a spin, give it a whirl, take it out for a drive. Give it a test. I would give it at least 90 days of ketogenic diet or exogenous keto. Give it at least 90 days. Don't quit after a week. It didn't cure me. I guess it doesn't work. Give it some time. If it makes a radical improvement, great. If it makes a little improvement, also great. If it does nothing, no big deal. You just go back to your old diet then. No reason to stay on it if it's not helping. But if it's helping to any extent, then you have the choice to make. What is the cost benefit here? Like, how hard is it for me to do this and stick to this versus the benefit that we're getting or the benefit that my child is getting? But I cannot abide anymore misguided professionals scaring people away from what could be a life-saving, life-changing metabolic therapy. And that's what I mean when I say keto is more than a diet. It's more than a diet. It's not like any other diet you've ever tried. It's not like any other way of eating you've ever tried. And again, because I'm not talking about weight loss. A lot of things work for weight. Not everything works for Angelman syndrome. Not everything works for glycogen storage disease. Not everything works for at least one case of cerebral palsy. I'm not having it anymore. I'm not having it. So I'll post links to all the metabolic theory of cancer stuff, the tripping over the truth. I'll link to the review I wrote of this book. And what else? If you're interested in the Metabolic Health Summit, I'll put a link if it fits. If not, just Google MHS Metabolic Health Summit 2022. It's very expensive. But if you really want the, that's the premier conference, I think, in my opinion. Not to belittle any others. I love Keto Fest. I love the Low Carb USA events. Like, I love it all. But this, I think, is the most premier academic oriented, like cutting edge frontier of research gets presented here, I would say, here being the Metabolic Health Summit. And I'll link to the rant that I mentioned about keto as a fad and it's unsustainable. And I will also, if there's room, link to the one that I did a rant about the weight loss researchers, because even there, keto is different. Keto is more than just a diet, and it's not like any other way of eating. And I didn't bore you with the reasons why in detail, but it's in here. All right, thank you for watching. And that was maybe a strange video, a departure from me. It wasn't like necessarily actionable information or mindset or anything, but I felt compelled to do this. I've wanted to make this video for a while. I read this book a couple of weeks ago, so that's it. And if this didn't reignite you, I don't know, but I hope it did, and I will see you next time.